And welcome to the Pride of Detroit PODcast. PrideOfDetroit.com, Pride of Detroit on Twitter, Pride of Detroit on Facebook. Hey, you know where to find us. You know where we're at. We'll never leave you. We'll always be here. Live on twitch.tv/ Pride of Detroit. // We still use slashes because of these wonderful URLs out there. I don't even know what URL stands for. Let's see who knows URL. I am Christopher Fett, the adequate host at Christopher Fett on Twitter. I do not know what URL stands for. Jeremy Reisman, the fearless leader, he's already shaking his head no at Detroit Online. How's it going, Jeremy?
It's good. I'm glad that our stat boy, I can tell he's typing furiously to solve this one out that I'm sure
Is he
our
searching in Bing?
listeners-
Is he searching in Bing?
We'll have to find out and wait. But yeah, I know our Twitch chat and probably live listeners, all the nerds out there, are yelling at their podcasts. I use that term affectionately, Ryan. Don't give me that look.
Ryan Matthews. At Ryan_POD. What did Bing, Google, Ask Jeeves, whatever you use, Alta Vista, what did it turn up? What does URL stand for?
Well, as our good friend Wisco Lion fan mentions, it's Universal Ryan Locator.
Ryan.
Yeah,
So
which
it's
is
Andrew.
me. You found me.
Yeah, that's Andrew Cotto. That's how he's the universal Ryan locator.
Perfect.
Yeah, you're plugged into a
Perfect.
wall. He knows exactly where you are right now.
Couldn't be any more frightened.
He is approaching your house with pizza.
My life hangs in the balance, as does all of yours. So, welcome to the Pride of Detroit PODcast.
Weirdest opening we've ever had.
Yeah.
Well, what's also hanging in the balance is some interesting news with the coaching staff, and we're going to talk about it right now. Do you want to start with who may or may not be leaving yet? Because I know he's at the tail end of it, but I just real quick update on Aaron Glenn. I know I'm going out of order, Jeremy, so forgive me, but news came out this weekend that Aaron Glenn is out from the Cardinals job. The Cardinals are zeroing in. They're kind of on, I think, their last wave, Jeremy. And Aaron Glenn is not one of the finalists, from what we understand.
Yeah.
He is. Oh, go on.
Well, yeah, no, I was just going to say, there are obviously only two vacancies left, the Cardinals and the Colts, and Glenn was a candidate for both. There were kind of conflicting reports whether he was going to get a second interview with Arizona. Josina Anderson said there was still interest, whereas I think it was Albert Breer maybe who said right now there are only two candidates, and then apparently on Sunday they started letting some coaches know who aren't in the final mix, and Aaron Glenn was one of those. So yeah, like you were about to go into there, I think he still remains a candidate for the Colts job, but anyone who's been paying attention to that coaching search will tell you that doesn't mean anything right now, because just about, I think I might be a finalist for that Colts job still.
No, there is at least 7 people who have been called back for a second interview. And while it's not being reported by anyone among the Indianapolis Colts press, I know national sources was talking about, and I think it was the Ringer who had it, that word from around the Senior Bowl, which has become a lot less, as we've talked about a little bit off stream, Jeremy, a lot less about the draft there and more about reporters seeming to use it as a meet and greet. But the latest scuttlebutt out of Mobile this weekend was that Jim Irsay really wants an excuse to bring Jeff Saturday back.
Not surprising at all.
No,
but I mean, I don't know. I guess I mean, if we want to go back to our DEF CONs, I think I'm below a DEF CON 5 at this point. He is a finalist. He's probably one of 7 that are going to get that job, and maybe it's him. But I feel like this isn't his time right now. He's coming off an okay year. I think those of us inside of Detroit understand and can put into context some of the quote-unquote bad defensive performances last year, but it's going to be a tougher sell nationally, and I think Irsay is the kind of guy that probably cares about public perception more than he should. And so I'd be very surprised if Glenn gets a job, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities.
I think even the Colts writers are getting tired.
Oh,
I can only
definitely,
imagine.
yes.
Like I saw Zach Kiefer from The Athletic. He was like, the Colts are 4 weeks into their coaching search.
It's crazy.
Well, it's got to be hard too because I'm sure one of the guys for these remaining jobs, Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator for the Eagles, nobody can like talk to him right now because he's in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So like, and I know that's been another big name. So I'm sure we're gonna have to keep waiting on these two jobs if either of them care about Shane, or if there's someone, if maybe there's the outside chance someone really cares about someone from the Chiefs staff. I think the Eric Bieniemy star has faded completely at this point, but you never know.
The frustrating part on my end is that this is just dragging on so long, right? And if Glenn somehow lands that job, that means, well, okay, we've had all this time where we could have been searching for a defensive coordinator to replace him, and didn't have that time. So it's not good to be that late in the draft process.
Way behind the eight ball at that
Yeah,
point.
exactly.
Yeah.
So hopefully it doesn't happen that way. I mean, I hope for the best for Aaron Glenn. I don't think necessarily landing in Indianapolis is the best for him anyways. So yeah, it's a little frustrating to see this process play out as long as it is. But like I said, I don't have a lot of worry that Glenn is gone.
Well, there was one coach the Lions had to replace, one of a particular importance, not a coordinator, but Deuce Staley. Lions have allowed Deuce Staley to leave the organization, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I think that's that. How did that work? So it's like he had a contract, but they decided to like let him go so he could explore this opportunity with the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah. Obviously, sometimes we don't really know what Deuce Staley's role is going to be yet with the Panthers, but it seems like at best it's going to be a lateral move. It's probably going to be a slight down step. It doesn't look like he's going to get the OC job. I'm not sure if they've officially hired one or not, but it sounded like he wasn't going to be the OC there. But yeah, like obviously the reasoning for it, he wants to take care of his mother who's going through some health issues. Carolina, I think she lives in South Carolina or North Carolina. I'm not sure which one. So he's going to be close. And yeah, like he obviously approached the Lions. It's like, hey, I want to be here, but there are more important things right now. I don't want to take my foot out of coaching. This is kind of the perfect opportunity for me where I can be close to my mom. I can keep my head in the coaching game as well. And so you want to give the Lions credit, right? I can't imagine there's an organization out there that'd be like, no, you can't do that. Like, we want you here. But maybe there is. I'm glad that the Lions aren't in that category, and it's an unfortunate. It's a big loss. I'll let you guys kind of give your thoughts on how big of a loss it is, and I know we'll talk about his replacement who got hired today, or at least the report dropped today. But I don't know. Let's go to you, Ryan. What are your thoughts on losing Deuce?
Yeah, I know that the folks over at Honolulu Blues, they had a chance to talk to Taylor Decker, and Taylor Decker talked a little bit about the impact that Deuce Staley had on the organization in terms of the smiles, the laughs, the tears, the whole gamut of emotions that ran with the players and Deuce Staley, and the way that he talked up DeAndre Swift. I mean, he was one of his biggest coaches in terms of supported him, but also probably ran him pretty hard too at the same time. He was big on saying that he could be the best running back in the NFL at one moment, and then the other moment you'd see him on the sideline losing his mind, apoplectic because he didn't he didn't hit a hole, or he didn't cut something up, or he didn't do something. And I think it's going to be a big task to replace a guy who seemingly is as big in terms of his personality and his kind of his aura in Detroit.
Yeah, I think it didn't take much, even if you were just someone who dropped in with something like Hard Knocks. Excuse me, I've been still kind of dealing with this a little bit. Yeah, even if you were someone who just dropped in for something like Hard Knocks, like the fact that they went to him as kind of this vocal icon of the offensive side of the ball, and how much he worked with DeAndre Swift and everything else, that he was this, I don't want to say character, I feel like that downgrades it, but he was definitely a leader presence in that locker room. for that entire offensive side of the team. And, we talked with him several times here.
Yeah.
We had him on the podcast, and just the energy he brought, be it, talking about how much he still misses being able to be on the field or going after Jeremy's mustache. You can feel it.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a loss. I am very fascinated by his replacement, Scottie Montgomery.
Yeah.
So I remember Scottie, I think last I had heard from him when he was the East Carolina head coach. Not great times there, a straight 3-9 record all 3 years that he was there. But I think he's been having some notable stops along the way. He's been with the Steelers as a wide receivers coach. He was coaching running backs for the Colts last couple of years, which meant that he was coaching Jonathan Taylor, which is intriguing.
I'm through the roof with this hire. I don't think they could have gotten it any better, honestly. This is a guy who got interviewed for offensive coordinating jobs last year. He's a guy who's been a head coach. He's been a quarterback's coach. He's been a wide receivers coach. He's been a running backs coach. He's been on the up and up in that Colts organization for the past 2 years. And as far as I understand, he almost got the offensive coordinator job when they fired the offensive coordinator mid-season last year. I don't like as a 1-for-1 replacement. I don't think they could have gotten anyone closer to Deuce. And I don't know if his coaching style is necessarily going to be the same. But if you're coming with the pedigree of the guy who helped Jonathan Taylor get to the league leader in 2021 in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns, and really just a good, Nyheim Hines, another good back out of that group, and sure, a lot of that is offensive line and just talented guys, but I don't know, like another former player, he played wide receiver in the NFL, and actually when he was the Steelers wide receivers coach, do you know who one of his wide receivers were?
I'm guessing it's probably Antoine Randall.
It sure was.
Yeah.
So another weird situation where we have a pair of coaches where one coached the other in one of those times. So I think this was a great hire. And again, like Dan Campbell, like this is another notch in his belt of he can, like, if you lose, if this team continues to have their coaching staff picked apart, it's hard not to have confidence that Campbell's going to go and find a guy who has a good resume. And even, the reports when it dropped was that he chose the Lions. Like there were several other teams interested in bringing him in. So again, another big win for Dan Campbell. And obviously we have to wait and see the results play for themselves. But again, I in terms of a guy that is experienced, in terms of a guy who's had success in multiple places, and a guy who can fill in multiple roles and maybe be on that track to be an offensive coordinator if Tanner isn't your guy, I think it was a great hire. Great hire.
I think I just want to say real quick, I think the only like sicko part of me that I'm so glad that Ben Johnson's back. I didn't want Ben Johnson to go anywhere, but like there's just this curiosity of like what Dan Campbell would have done. Because I agree with you, Jeremy, like Scottie Montgomery, great hire, in terms of his resume, in terms of some of the things that he's done as a positions coach, as Chris alluded to, head coaching career in East Carolina, not great. But I think if we've learned anything from coaches, whether they're coordinators or they're head coaches or assistant coaches, whatever they may be, you might be good at something, but not be good at something else. You know what? And it seems like Scottie Montgomery is a pretty solid positions coach, but there's just part of me that's like, I wonder what the Lions would have done. Like, I'm so curious to know what that would have been, but maybe I'll have that wish granted next year, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I think it'll be fascinating because I feel like, in this age of where coaches are coming from past of being coordinators and Dan isn't coming from a past of being a coordinator, I think that allows more flexibility and just, you talk about identity for teams. The Lions, I think they have an identity, but it's not that, it's because their coach is offensive minded or their coach is defensive minded. It's just more of a holistic identity. So I'm curious to see that more tested, tried at some point in the future. But yeah, I think to Jeremy's point, like you lose someone like Deuce and you're able to have a contingency in mind, or at the very least, you're able to go out and recruit a contingency.
Yeah. What you just said too, Chris, made me think of Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. I remember when he talked about, first getting into coaching, it was Bill Parcells that was like, no, like you're going to go into scouting. That's where you're going to start.
Mm-hmm.
So you get this, wide array of experiences and can kind of build on those things. So, you become a tactician of many, many different fields.
Right.
So,
And that's definitely true of Montgomery too, because he wasn't just the head coach at ECU, but he became the offensive coordinator at Duke. He became the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Maryland. So he knows the offense. He knows that side of the ball kind of through and through. And so again, like if there needs to be a guy who steps up as an interim offensive coordinator or whatever, pass game coordinator, whatever, like he has a thorough understanding of that side of the ball. And the one interesting thing that to kind of keep in the back of your mind come draft time, and you might like this, Chris, a lot of people in the Colts organizations said that part of the reason he got hired there was because they considered him an expert at RPO.
RPO, baby.
So maybe a mobile quarterback in the future?
Oh, I thought you were suggesting maybe Jared Goff running RPO.
Nope, that's not at all what
that
I'm
would be
suggesting.
My God.
Nope.
Oh
My God, hold on to your butts. Oh God, it's happening. One last bit of coaching news, and then we'll move on. So I think on this podcast, we're going to be giving you your off-season primer. I forgot to tease that at the start, but one last bit of note. I think this is the last piece that we needed to fill out the coaching staff again, Jeremy. Cornerbacks coach. And that has the Lions have turned to, again, former NFL player, and actually former Detroit Lion.
Yes, sir.
Dre Bly.
Former Pro Bowl Lions quarterback.
Cornerback. Yeah. So, yeah. 3 years with the Rams, 3 years with the Lions, 2 years with the Broncos, a year with the 49ers, off season again with the Lions. And as of late, he was coaching for about 3 years at North Carolina.
Yeah, his alma mater, obviously. I don't know. This is a fun hire. It was fun when the news kind of came down the pike. I think a lot of us our age and older knew Dre Bly and was probably one of our favorite players in the early to mid 2000s. And so cool to see him come back and cool to see him like post a bunch of pictures on his social media of him when he was a player. I think the jury is very much out on him in terms of talent as a coach, because listen, obviously you already got a step ahead of a lot of people if you've succeeded at the NFL level at that position. It means you know how to play the position. That said, there's a lot of there's a huge difference, right, between being able to do and being able to teach. I'm sure Ryan as a teacher can speak a little bit to that. And the results at UNC were not good. I think we don't need to beat around the bush there. Their defense was bad. Their secondary was bad. The question is how much of that is Dre Bly's fault? How much of that is how different will his job be working with NFL players instead of college players? And so I don't know. Like this is one that I'm psyched about. I'm not too concerned about the history, but I don't know. I'm also not completely disregarding it either.
I think what has me encouraged about this hire is again, kind of I don't want to say shelter, but kind of, the system that he's being put into where he has coaches like Aaron Glenn and he has Brian Duker and he has some of these other guys who, have walked the walk in the NFL, so to speak. I mean, as a secondary coach, Aaron Glenn was pretty damn good in New Orleans. I think he's got his cornerbacks down pretty well. Let's get some talent there, and we'll see how this defense can play as a whole. But again, I think he has some people around him who can kind of, help him improve as a coach.
I will be fascinated to see how he does coaching in the pros versus coaching with talent that someone like Mac Brown recruits. Let's go with that.
Right.
Because that is, I mean, you mentioned, how it's not great at North Carolina, but I think that goes above him. And that's just, he's been on Mac Brown's staff for basically the entire time there. And I don't know, I keep abreast of North Carolina football, but it's not exactly a program that has ever really had defensive success anyway.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. Ryan brings up an interesting point there too about like getting a guy that you can kind of mold as a head coach, or not as a position coach, right? A guy that's still pretty green to the position. And while I think that's smart and probably part of the reason for the hire, you're also kind of at a position here though where it's like the Lions are going to be really young at the cornerback position, and you don't want to miss.
And
on
probably
that
going to
position
draft
coach.
one.
Yeah, probably going to draft one, and it's their weakest spot on the roster right now, and so you need to make sure that hire works out. And so there is an inherent risk here, but the one things you can definitively say about Bly in the positive is that he's going to work his ass off because he very clearly cares about this franchise, cares about the organization, cares about the position, and he knows the position. And so that's a great place to start, right? A motivated coach who's young, he can connect with the players because he's been a former player and he knows the position. He just, again, there's still that disconnect that he needs to prove though, where he is able to communicate, he is able to teach at an effective level, and that's just we have to wait and see at this point with that.